Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Kaya. I live in Austin, Texas, and I am a real estate investor and small business owner. I currently have a rental property in Austin that's bringing in thousands of dollars every month, and I am on the hunt for more rental properties to add to my portfolio this year. Now, we all know that real estate investing is one of the best ways to build wealth, especially in a city like Austin, Texas, that has so much plot armor going for it. This city is exploding in value. There are so many companies moving here, and honestly, in my opinion, and I've made videos about this before, Austin is one of the safest and hottest markets you can invest in. So maybe you're young and you don't have a ton of money saved, or maybe you do have a job, but you're not really willing to put down like $100,000 for a down payment. This video is for you. So we're gonna get into how to get into real estate investing, how to break into the real estate industry without having a ton of money. So there are two categories that we're gonna kind of go into. There's the first category, which is if you don't currently own a home, and then there's the second category if you do currently own a home. Now, if you don't own a home, don't sweat it, that's okay. I have 3 techniques for you to get into real estate investing, and they kind of vary. So the first one we'll get into requires 0 money up front. The second method requires a little bit of money up front, and then the third method is the most involved, and it does require a little bit more money, but I think it is the best option. So the first method we'll get into is real estate wholesaling. Now, wholesaling is a whole topic. You can search thousands of videos and articles to figure out how exactly to get into wholesaling, but I'll just give you a brief overview. And by the way, in the state of Texas where I live, you do not need a real estate license to do wholesaling. So a wholesaler is kind of like a middleman. So say for example, I'm a wholesaler and I find a really great distressed property that would appeal to an investor. So I go into contract under that property and then I sell that contract to an investor. Let's go through an example. Now, the key here, how you make your money, is that let's say I go into contract for a distressed property at $200,000. Then I find an investor and I sell that contract to the investor for $210,000. That difference, that $10,000, is mine to keep, and the buyer, that investor, pays it. So here are the pros of real estate wholesaling. It can be really, really profitable because 0 money leaves your hands at any point if you don't want it to. Now, some wholesalers will spend money towards marketing, like printing flyers or running ads, but if you don't want to spend a single dime on your wholesaling business, you don't have to. Wholesaling can be really, really profitable if you have great people skills and a huge network and a lot of free time on your hands. Wholesaling is very much a volume game. The more you do, the more money you're gonna earn. And if you don't have the right network, if you don't have the right people skills, it's gonna be very difficult to broker deals. If you have a great eye for deals, or even if you don't have a great eye for deals, but you have good intuition, this is a great way to kind of get your foot in the door of real estate investing, because this is awesome practice for when you eventually save enough money from your wholesaling profits, you can use that money towards a down payment on a great deal that you get to own. So it's a great way to build up your network, meet a lot of real estate agents, meet a lot of investors, and honestly, in real estate, your network is your net worth. I can't tell you how many people are in my network right now that have helped me in unexpected ways with my real estate journey. Now, the cons of wholesaling is that it can be very time intensive. Just because you spend a certain amount of hours doesn't mean you're gonna get a deal. It also can be risky if you do not include a contingency clause that allows you to back out of the contract if you don't find an interested buyer in time. And the last con is that you don't really build equity in real estate. In my opinion, one of the most important parts of real estate investing is the fact that you are building equity in great investment properties. They appreciate over time, and then you get to, you know, pay off the mortgage by having renters. So although you are getting money from wholesaling, your money's not growing while you sleep. It's not the typical passive income. You could get a summer job and work at, I don't know, an ice cream store or intern for a businessman, but that's not necessarily gonna give you the real estate experience that wholesaling will. Wholesaling is excellent practice for finding deals, and you can eventually use that practice and experience when you start to build your own portfolio. So that's a way to get into real estate investing that involves $0 down. Now we're gonna get into another example that requires a little bit of money. Now, the next one is a little bit of a controversial one, and it is rental arbitrage, also known as Airbnb arbitrage. Now, everyone knows that there's so much money to be made in Airbnb or short-term hosting. I actually was a super host on Airbnb myself before I converted that property to a short-term lease. If you wanna know specifically how much I made on my first year of doing Airbnb and then my profit that I kept doing Airbnb, I will link that particular video down as well. With rental arbitrage, you rent out a property property without owning the property. And if you're confused, I totally get it. I was also very confused when I first heard about this, but basically say I want to do rental arbitrage. I go to a landlord at a condo, for example, and I say, hey, I want to lease your property for 2 to 3 years. Let's just say 2 years. I will pay rent every single time. Then what I do is I furnish the whole place, and then I turn around and I put that condo on Airbnb and I start hosting on Airbnb. You still have to pay your landlord every month, which is a very typical expense when you do kind of become a landlord, because you have either a mortgage to pay, or in this case with rental arbitrage, you have to pay rent. But hopefully your Airbnb earnings at this point are enough to cover the rent, the utilities, the internet, other sort of operational expenses that come about from hosting on Airbnb. Now, unlike wholesaling, there is kind of significant startup cost to doing rental arbitrage. You do have to pay, for example, the application fee to apply to the condo or whatever, and then you have to furnish the whole place. And depending on how expensive you want to furnish it, how big the property is, I, from my experience, estimate that you will spend between $5,000 and $15,000 to furnish a 1 to 3 bedroom property. And not only are you furnishing it, but you're also adding the amenities that Airbnbs need, like towels, linens, comforters, coffee machines, things like that. If you want me to make a video about kind of like a checklist that you need to go through before getting your property on Airbnb, like all the essentials that you need and the extra things that make you a super host, leave a comment down below and let me know you want to see that video, and give this video a thumbs up so I know to film it. Is rental arbitrage legal? Maybe. It depends on your local laws and regulations. Also, I strongly suggest that you get permission from the landlord to do rental arbitrage. I think most landlords will disagree and be like, absolutely no, you may not do rental arbitrage on my property. However, if you are able to convince a landlord that, listen, I will lease your property for 2 to 3 years and I will pay rent on time every single month, and also really emphasize that Airbnb has air cover, which ensures, I think, up to $1 million of damages. Don't get me wrong, it will be very difficult to find a landlord who will agree to this, but if you do find a landlord who, for example, has an apartment complex or a duplex or something, that could potentially be very good, because you build a relationship with that landlord and then you prove to them over time that this is still profitable for everyone involved. Pros and cons. So pros of rental arbitrage, you can make a ton of money because Airbnb is very lucrative, especially if you live in a very kind of vibrant, bustling, young city that attracts a lot of tourists. The second pro is that you can learn the ins and outs of doing Airbnb and hosting on short-term rental sites without actually owning property yourself, without assuming that risk yourself. And of course, you can use all the profits from your rental arbitrage business to save towards a down payment on an investment property. The last pro that I wanted to mention is that this is actually a pretty straightforward business to scale, because unlike a typical Airbnb host where you buy properties to scale your business, in this case you just have to lease properties, and that's so much easier and way less money than actually buying properties. With Airbnb, economies of scale is a pretty important concept because things get less expensive the more volume you buy. So for example, if you start to buy with like a professional, like commercial hotel grade, like linens company, for example, you can buy 50 sets of linens for much cheaper than buying 3 sets of linens on Amazon when you look at the cost per linen. So it's easier to scale to many properties with this business model, and that's just one thing to keep in mind. Cons of rental arbitrage is that hosting on Airbnb, I don't care what people say, it is a lot of work. I've done it firsthand. I did it for a year and it was a lot of work. Rental arbitrage is definitely not passive income. You do have to work for it. Hosting on Airbnb does take a lot of effort. However, when you reach that certain point of economies of scale, you can start to hire property managers and it becomes much easier. And the other con to rental arbitrage is that it can be very difficult to find a landlord who agrees to this sort of arrangement. Now, the final way to get into real estate investing without owning a home has to do with buying a home. But hear me out. So this is called house hacking, and house hacking is a pretty genius concept. So house hacking basically means that you buy a property and then you rent part of it out while you still live there. So you could buy a single family home and rent out a few rooms or 1 room, or you can buy a 2 to 4 multifamily unit home and rent out one side of the duplex or the other units while you live in one of the units. Your money down is what you invest, and then theoretically, if you do the numbers right, the rent that you get from your tenants should cover your mortgage, utilities, etc. Now, this is where house hacking is different from buying like a typical investment property, because typically investment properties require 15 to 20% down, and your interest rates aren't that great. But when you house hack, you are buying it as a primary residence, which means you qualify for lower interest rates, and you can put as little as 0% down with certain loan assistance programs. The pros of this are that you build equity in a property. Now, building equity in a property is one of the most important things you can do in real estate investing. I think in real estate investing, you have to play the long game. There's obviously flipping houses and things like that, but that's not, for me, that's not really investing in real estate because you're immediately selling it. When you buy a great piece of property that's in an appreciating area, you're counting on the fact that it has long-term gains. So when you do house hacking, you get to buy a property in what's hopefully a really great up-and-coming area or an area that has shown significant growth. So when you build equity in a property, you can actually later leverage that equity to get more properties, and that's what I'm going to talk about later in this video. Another pro is that obviously you get to offset your mortgage and utilities and other expenses associated with the house because you have rental income coming in. Another pro is that as opposed to rental arbitrage or hosting on Airbnb, having long-term tenants is way less work. The only real work that you have to do is maintenance and also vetting and finding tenants to live in your space. The other pro with house hacking is that you have a much lower down payment as opposed to buying an investment property. The cons of house hacking is that you have to live there. So if you buy a property that you're not super enthused about, you do have to live there in order to qualify for a primary residence down payment. That being said, you do need money for a down payment. This is definitely not a way to invest in real estate if you have $0 to your name. You do need money to do this. However, there are a lot of government loan assistance programs out there. If you're a veteran, for example, or if you're a first-time home buyer, there are a lot of assistance programs out there that can help you to lower your down payment or qualify for better interest rates. This is the most financially intensive option because you are actually buying a property and like diving headfirst into the deep end. However, this is a great way to really invest in real estate, and this is the only true way to invest in real estate because your asset will appreciate over time and you'll see greater returns. Now, those are the ways to invest in real estate if you don't own a home and you have little to no money. If you do have a home and you have little to no money, there's good news. So say you already bought a house and you live in it with you and your partner. It's a 2-bedroom, so you can't really rent out a room or anything because the house is very full. There's still hope because you have bought a property and hopefully it has appreciated. Take a look at the value of your house now. If your house value has increased in value, you can probably leverage the equity that you've built in your home. Now, the end goal here is to pull money out of your current primary residence and use that to buy an investment property. So for example, the investment property that I currently own in Austin, I bought it for $400,000 and now it is worth $700,000, give or take. Personally, I think it's worth more, but we'll see. So there's value in that house that I can leverage. I can do one of 3 things. I can do a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. I could do a cash out refinance, or I could do just a simple home equity loan. There are so many articles out there that go over the differences between everything, but I'm gonna focus on a HELOC and a cash out refi. So a HELOC, or a home equity line of credit, is basically where you take the difference, and there's a lot of math that goes into it that I'm not gonna get into, like you have to look at the LTV and everything, but in simple terms, you take the difference of what equity you've built up and you can actually pull that money out. With a home equity line of credit, you don't have a specific amount you pull out. It's kind of like a credit card with an upper limit of how much equity or the difference in equity that is in the house. So say with my investment property, I have say $200,000 worth of equity that I have available. I can use up to $200,000 with this HELOC and pull money out. So say I pull money out once for a down payment, then I pull money out again to furnish it because I'm gonna turn that investment property into an Airbnb. There are many things you can do. You can also use the HELOC towards home improvements. You can use it towards student debt. You can use it for anything, but for the purpose of this video, we'll talk about in terms of real estate investing. What's great about a HELOC is that you keep your current mortgage rate because you're not changing your mortgage at all. The downside though is that you do have to repay what you pull out at a different interest rate, and that could be high, it could be low, it just depends. Now, a cash out refinance is the other option, and this is very different from a HELOC because with a cash out refinance, refinance, you are refinancing your mortgage. You're getting a different rate, which could be advantageous if the interest rate that you can qualify for now is lower than what you originally had your mortgage set for. With a cash out refi, you get a lump sum out from your refinance, and then you can use that cash towards anything. There's no repayment period that you have to worry about. However, you do have to repay at closing costs. So if you do own a home and you don't have a ton of savings, think about leveraging the equity that you've built in your current house. So those are all of the ways that I personally think are good ways to get into real estate investing or dip your toes into the real estate industry without actually putting a ton of money down. Obviously with house hacking, you are, taking the leap and buying a property, but you don't have to put a ton down because you're buying it as a primary residence. If you found this video helpful, I would love it if you gave it a thumbs up so I know that you really enjoyed it. If you love watching real estate content, business content, entrepreneurship content, this is the channel for you. I upload once a week all about real estate investing and also small business and passive income ideas. So please do subscribe. I actually found out that like 95% of my viewers are not subscribed, so I would appreciate it if y'all subscribed and stuck around because then you'll be notified when I upload new videos. So I hope y'all found this video helpful. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye!